F1 2019. 3 races so far, 3 Mercedes 1-2 finishes. The best start to a season since the all-conquering Williams FW14B that carried Nigel Mansell to the 1992 World Championship. And in a Development Corner special, Mercedes Technical Director James Allison is going to help us explain and understand some of the best bits of the Mercedes W10. Now, James, I've borrowed my daughter's marker pens once again. If we start with last year's car, now explain the front wing changes at the start of the year, but for people who still aren't clear about it. So the front wing has changed from last year, and this is all about the dirty air that comes off, that spirals off the front wheels, right? So last year's front wings had these bits sort of guiding air around. How did they help, and how does the removal of them this year cause you issues?
Okay, well, they help in 2 different styles, really. This wheel and this wheel make a lot of mess behind because we're not allowed to put bodywork around the wheel to streamline it. So the wheel creates a load of aerodynamic chaos.
This kind of thing?
Well, yeah, sort of. It creates 2 types of chaos. One is at the bottom, if I draw it down here, there's the wheel inside view and there's the ground. Where the air meets the wheel at the bottom, it runs into a brick wall there. It can't go under the wheel.
Right.
So it has to squirt around the wheel like that.
Right.
And some goes in, some goes out. So that squirt of air is very, very damaging if you let it go under the car.
Okay.
So you want to redirect that squirt at the bottom of the tyre. Then at the top of the tyre, the air goes around the tyre and at a certain point it falls off, rather like your scribbles. Yeah. That is low energy air that damages the back of the car as well. So you're trying to do 2 things, control the bottom squirt and the top separation. Generally speaking, the curvature at the back of these front wing end plates manages the bottom squirt. All these flicks and flags and detail on the top surface of the wing help to manage the separation off the back of the wheel and the dirty air that comes from that. So those flicks and flags on the top are all got rid of by the regulation, and the amount that we could curve the air at the back of the front wing end plate was sharply reduced. So both aspects of the tyre management, of the wake management, were eroded by this new regulation.
Okay, so you chose to go with these full width front wing flaps here, nice and chunky around here, whereas what I call the Italian solution, Ferrari, Toro Rosso, Alfa Romeo, have all gone very sort of slim down towards there. Yeah. And it looks like they were trying to direct some of that air in that little gap around the front tyre. Is that right? And explain your philosophy as opposed to the other philosophy.
Well, I think it's more subtle than that. There are lots and lots of different ways of approaching a given problem, and quite often the solution you arrive at depends a bit on your starting point. So traditionally the Mercedes car has placed a really, really large amount of its performance on how the flow develops on that front wing end plate to front flap. We have been really loading up in previous seasons the front wing around that corner and unloading it nearer the centre. That's been a lot of our aerodynamic philosophy.
Right, so you've been loading up this part here.
Load up the tip, yeah.
Right.
Now, when we first put these new regulations on with rules that don't allow this geometry anymore and have much, much less geometrical freedom, when we first put them on, it hemorrhaged downforce off our car because one of our key features was totally broken. Right. So when I say hemorrhage, I mean about 2.5 seconds gone.
You freaked out with these new rules.
Well, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so we start to try to understand what's broken and why, and all of the interface between the front wing end plate and the flap was irredeemably knackered. and just collapsed. The flow structures that we had been developing had just collapsed. We start working on it, and we start to try to understand why won't the air go where we want it to anymore, and we start to modify the geometry, start to see how we can persuade it back into order. And our first version you see in our launch car. If you look in our launch car, you see that our front wing end plate doesn't even point outboard, it points inboard. Because at the time we froze that car, that was the best we could do. That was restoring some of the control that we'd previously had outboard, restoring some of the load that we'd previously had outboard, but we couldn't yet expand it sideways without it falling off the wing. And it took us another few weeks, months to learn how to do that.
Okay.
But once we had learned how to do that, we by and large had managed to retain a lot of the power that we had in the tip of the front wing previously, which had been an important part of our world. And at tracks where the front wing is very loaded, that's been a very important thing for us from a performance point of view. But if you look at our car over the different races, you'll see that we're not always right up at the top here, loaded at the tip really to the maximum of what the regulations will permit.
Right.
You'll see that we also have some backed off stuff, and it's a bit track dependent. So where it makes sense for us to unload a bit for the track, we unload a bit for the track. Where we can plow that performance in, we plow it in. But it's all just the sort of, you're just seeing the history of a car that had a very high dependency on the efficiency of the flow around that region, being broken by new regulations, and then our attempt to reconstruct it and get back to the type of behavior that we knew had brought us a lot of performance in the past.
Okay, we'll talk about bringing you performance. What brings you the sort of meat and veg, if you like, you know, the main bit of your front downforce? Engineers refer to the Y250 vortex. Just explain what that is, why is it called Y250, and why is it so important?
Okay, well,
what's the best photo to show that
we
with?
talked about the behavior at the tips. That, you know, that managing the outwash is one of the two big jobs that the front wing is doing. So that's the tips. But the
Right.
Y250.
So
I'll
good,
go with
good
the,
air.
Oh, good air.
Good
okay.
air, yeah.
Well, I'll go with white because this
All
is
right.
this is a coordinate system. So
Okay.
when we talk about X, Y, or Z, we're just talking about a coordinate system. In our world, Z is upwards. In our world, up and down the car, so front to back is X,
Yeah.
and sideways, these are all 90-degree corners here,
Yeah.
sideways is Y.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the coordinate system we talk about. And the regulations don't allow the front flap to come anywhere near the front wing. They have a box that you're not allowed inside, and that box starts 250 millimeters from the center line of the car. So at the coordinate Y, 250.
Okay.
Now, that's where Y250 comes from.
Okay.
But the significance to us is that at Y250, we have the end of this front flap. It's like a naked end of a wing sitting there.
Yes, it looks as if it's been cut off.
Yeah, and it's cut off by the regulation
Okay.
at that line. And the significance of it cutting off at that line is at every wingtip, where you have a pressure difference between the top surface and the bottom surface, where that wing ends, you will get flow spilling around from the high pressure part of the wing on top to the low pressure part. It will spill over the edge of the wing. And that spilling of the air across that surface from top to bottom creates a very powerful vortex that runs backwards, triggered by this tip of the flap here, and runs downwards through the car. That is an incredibly powerful vortex. It's like a tornado of air. And that tornado of air, if you can pick it up and deal with it nicely with the bargeboard surfaces behind and the leading edge of the floor behind, you get a lot of downforce from it. So developing that vortex powerfully, efficiently, so developing it really strong, but without generating too much drag in the process, is a big part of the shaping of this front wing, front flap.
Yep.
It is a massive part of the suspension design. The reason we like to lift up these wishbones, we keep talking each year about getting these wishbones high, is that we want the Y250 vortex to pass beneath this lower wishbone.
Okay.
If it hits the lower wishbone, it will sort of rob it of a lot of its power.
Yeah.
And it's a part of why we do the nose the way we do. We want our nose to be as aerodynamically transparent as we can to the Y250. We want to give it room to breathe so that it can spin up like this really powerful tornado without being interfered with by the nose surface, and can do all its good work behind generating downforce for us at the leading edge of the floor, where a lot of the car's downforce is generated.
Okay, so does that mean that some of the horrendous wheel wake dirty air that we had off the front,
Yeah.
you can, to a certain extent, allow that to be naughty and just go off and do whatever it's going to do, because this is what's gaining you the front downforce,
Well,
and that's the important bit.
You try to get the bad air, in your words, away from the car,
Yeah.
and you try to get the clean air that you have steered and retained its energy as far as you possibly can. You try to steer the good air so that it can hit the parts of the car that are curved on the underside of the car to
Yeah.
generate downforce in an efficient way.
Okay, so is it that when we go down towards the car then, and this is quite a nice one to look at because this explains it here, or you can see some of the bits here. These insanely complicated bits around, you know, where the driver's knee would be, I mean, it's too many to even draw in here.
Yeah.
They're all dealing with the Y250 vortex, that powerful vortex, are they?
Yeah, that Y250 vortex is making its way down here and is being joined by dozens of others that are all triggered by these sharp edges and little winglets that all, at every one of their tips, is creating another one of these things, which if you can organize them nicely, then they all join up. They don't, if you have two vortexes that are going in opposite directions, they can sort of cancel one another out. But if you get them to join up, they can amplify each other's strength, so that by the time they hit the leading edges of the floor, where it's like a sort of ground effect car of the 70s and 80s, when it hits that leading edge curvature, you get very, very low suction, very, very low pressures, very high amounts of suction that pull the car down onto the road.
Okay, so we can see it from this back shot. So it's coming in. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, that's not.
Okay, but it's all being managed. Tell me if I'm doing this wrong. By this, and then it starts to hit the floor in this section, and you've got these little, I call them sort of bushy eyebrow wings, or sort of, what are they doing? What are they doing on the floor?
They would fall in the category of what I would say is aero porn. The main structures, the big things we've been talking about, are the flow field that generates the main performance for the car.
Okay.
And then all over the car, you see things up there on our nose.
Yeah, I like these.
Yeah, down here on our floor. There are just little bits and bobs that have given us a fractional increase in performance, but are not part of the sort of grand design of the car. They're just things that, fiddling around in the tunnel, we found a little bit of a gain from.
They're very visual. We get excited about these little things, you know.
Well, we're pleased to excite you.
All right.
But if you want to look at the back of the car here, the big story here is not, you know, the little eyebrows or flicks or whatever. It is the narrowness of this pod. What we're trying to do with the narrowness of this pod is we care a lot ahead of the front wheels, ahead of the rear wheels. We want to.
Is this a better one?
Yeah, it's probably slightly better. We want to make sure that if you were going to cut a plane through the car at that point, we would want to make sure that ahead of these rear wheels, the amount of energy that is still left in the air that is attacking the back of the car, we want to make sure that the energy that's left there in the air is as high as possible, because that high energy air, if we can organize the car to deliver high energy air to that point, that high energy air is going to work wonders for us with our diffuser, with our rear wing, and with a load of important sensitive structures, especially the cutout at the back of the floor here, where the wheel, that's the sort of wheel, and that's the floor.
Yeah.
The gap between the wheel and the floor here is super important. You want high energy air arriving at that point.
Okay.
So if we can make this really slender and allow good air to come through it, some of which has been spun off this front wing, allow good air to come through it, if we can create bodywork that is svelte and downwashing, then we're just encouraging, as far as possible, encouraging air which has still got all the air energy of its free stream to arrive at this part of the car back here, where it can do a lot of work for us with very little drag.
Okay. Well, look, you've explained how you get a lot of the front downforce. You've explained how you get a lot of the rear downforce, how you want the air to get to the rear of the car. We haven't got much time left, so let's just do a couple of very quick things. People might have noticed that you split your airbox into 3 here. What different things going in different channels?
Yeah, it's just pretty straightforward. If you look at the top, there's the top of the chassis here. Well, actually, I'll draw it on here. You can just see a faint line in that hole, which is there and there.
Yeah.
All that is a structural roll hoop. So triangles are really strong. So yeah, there's the driver's helmet. That is just a really strong structure. But there isn't enough air, enough space there to get all the air that we need through that hole.
Oh, I see.
So we bulge it out either side with a non-structural sort of thing that is just to allow more air in and more air in. This bit feeds the engine, so that's where the air that's going to get mixed with fuel and burn goes. And this bit feeds radiators. So back down at the base of the car here, we've got a radiator lying on its side, which gets air fed to it, split off in ducts that run either side of the airbox that is feeding the combustion air.
Okay, and T-wings, these things at the back, you sometimes at some circuits have 2, here you've got 1.
Just give you a little bit, they do pretty much what the rear wing does. There's a little slither of box in the regulations we're allowed to put something in. And you know, it would be rude not to put stuff in it, given that it's there.
Okay.
And you can, if you shape it right, you can just increase the rear downforce at an efficiency that justifies its presence on the car.
Yeah, I see that. Rear wings we know about. You've got a serrated little strip on it. You've tried that before.
Yeah, that's in the aero porn category as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So it looks like a big thing, but not a massive thing. Okay, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for explaining this so brilliantly. It is a great car. You've had 3 1.2s with it. Nothing lasts forever. Has to come to an end at some point, but I hope for your sake that's no time soon.
Well, we hope so as well, but I think that the opening 3 races of the year have probably made us look a little stronger than we truly are. This is a fight. We're going to this race with absolutely no clue how it's going to work out, and excited to find out.
Okay, thank you.